All right, we're live and we're dancing, and I cannot wait to introduce the Welcome to the Winner Circle audience to today's guest. It's been a while, and I've been really looking forward to speaking with him. So on today's episode, we welcome a Wisconsin native now residing in Austin, Texas, who's lived a rich life full of experiences, a successful businessman and former host of the Spinning Logic podcast, who spent 16 years in the hotel industry as a general manager for Hilton and Sheraton, and is now currently the president of Onnit, an internationally recognized health and wellness brand. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Winner Circle, Jason Havey.
What's happening? Thanks for having me, Derek. I appreciate you letting me come on.
Yeah, I appreciate you having you on. And so this podcast was inspired by me taking Aubrey Marcus's Go For Your Win course almost 4 years ago now. And one of the most important things we go over in that course is my first question I ask to all the guests, and that is, what is your mission? So Jason Havey, what is your mission here on this earth plane, in this reality?
Yeah, that's awesome. And just to talk about Go For Your Win for half a second, it's such a great course too, because no matter what your mission is, the hardest thing to do is to start. And Go For Your Win really teaches you how to take that first step, which I think is hugely important, because that's actually where most missions end, is not taking that first step.
I agree.
So when you talk about mission, it's interesting when you think about the journey. The journey also comes with age too, right? Like, so when I was 18, I wanted to join the Army to test myself. So that's what I did, right? And then you want to get a girlfriend and get a job and make some money and whatever. And then as you get a little bit older, that mission starts to come into focus. And the one interesting thing that you find about it is it was always there. Even when you were immature and not really thinking about it, it was always there. It just wasn't entirely in focus until you learned a little bit more about the world. And mine, when I realized what it was, came in 2013, when I realized that I was really causing myself a lot of unnecessary hurt, like through procrastination, through drinking, through just almost avoiding things. And I realized what I was avoiding was even starting a mission. And that mission was, I really thought that my mission was, or I know my inner truth is that my mission is to make the world a better place. Not me alone try to make the world a better place. And the thing is that's such an audacious goal that I was just avoiding it altogether, because there's no way that I could actually do that, right? That's what you tell yourself. And so you start filling that with alcohol and procrastination and things to avoid even starting something that's so absurd that if you told it to anybody else, you would be embarrassed. But that's exactly what I was like determined to do, is that I wanted to help people be a little bit better, and make the world a nicer place and a friendlier place and more open place. And so that's when I made all these changes in my life. And I went and quit drinking, and I stopped watching sports. I wasted a lot of time watching sports. I stopped gambling. Then I went to Peru on my first ayahuasca retreat, and that really changed everything for me. It really allowed me to open up and allow more of this self-acceptance in, where I was like, I can do that. I'll find a way. And it eventually led me to Onnit in the last 6 years.
Yeah. Well, you're currently the president, and you worked your way up to that position.
I'm currently the CEO actually now. In March, I got promoted to CEO.
Yes. Beautiful. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
Let's talk about that journey on how you ended up at Onnit. I believe you first just volunteered. You reached out to Aubrey and you said you just wanted to be of service. So yeah, man, let's get into that.
Yeah, it's funny, man. Like when I talked about the mission changing, there was also this impactful moment that happened to me at that time. Is like you mentioned, I was working in hotels for 16 years. And I literally got my dream job. I was the general manager of the nicest hotel in my hometown. There's no better thing than that as a hotelier. And it was this great high performing Hilton in Madison, Wisconsin. And I just loved it. But I went to my hotel mentor's retirement party. And here's a guy that I looked at it like a god, like he could do no wrong. We went to the retirement party and in Milwaukee, and there was like 40 people there, and a couple of people said some nice things, and there was a little buffet set up, and he literally got the retirement watch, and then everybody just left. And I was so overcome with my hour drive home, like, that's it. That's how this journey ends, is everybody got checked in and everybody got checked out. And while that party wasn't the definition of his journey, because he impacted a lot of people like me and some other people, but it was so limited in scope. And I wanted to widen out that scope. And I realized if I continued on this journey that I wasn't going to be able to impact as many people as I could. And then while I was making these changes in my life, one of the things I did was I stopped watching sports. So I started listening to podcasts, and I listened to one of the very early ones with Rogan and Aubrey. And when I heard Aubrey talk, I was like, that I need to get more like that. I need to think more like that, audaciously like that. And so I just started following them, but I wasn't thinking about working it on it. But I started taking Alpha Brain, and Alpha Brain was the first supplement I ever took where I could actually feel it. And I was like, oh, there's something here. And so I started becoming a fan of the company. And then like when I started doing some distance running, and I'd always wear Onnit gear, and like in my head, just be like, I'm getting sponsored to be awesome through Onnit, you know? And so I became kind of a ravenous fan. And so then I did reach out to Aubrey and said, I'll be your assistant. And here I am, general manager of a Hilton. I had a good job. It was stable. My 401k was growing, all those stuff that you do when you live conventionally. And I was ready to give it all up because I was like, I need to give my life some meaning. And so I did offer to do that. And Aubrey thankfully declined. And he's like, if I find the right job for you, I'll let you know. Well, it was surely like 2 months later, he decided he wanted to give up the business side of it, so that he could really start to function more as a CEO. And I was the name he had in his head. And so we Skyped, and I came down there and interviewed, and that's how that happened.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history. Yeah. I was just really in the right place at the right time, because even today, people all the time that are sending emails to jobs@onnit.com that are offering to work for free. And I was like, I was one of those people, So when that account came to me, I used to respond to every one of those emails.
Yeah. So what is your advice for a listener today that is wanting to follow in your footsteps and work for Onnit? How can they best be of service to you and Onnit?
Well, I'll split that into two things. One, it's not just Onnit. Like, I think if you're on that journey, there's so many places that you can be impactful, and it doesn't really matter where you go. It matters what you do. And there's so many beautiful things that you can do. But if you really are specifically wanting to come to Onnit, I give everybody the same advice. And it's that you come in with being humble, with humility. And if you have to go work at the shake station or start in customer service, even if your resume says you deserve something better, go in there and do that. We have so many stories of people that have come in and worked someplace else. Over 25% of everybody that works there has been promoted at some point. And you look at a guy like Larry Maloney. I think you might have had him on the podcast. Or
not yet, but I will.
Yeah. So he has a great story. Like he was running a business, and he came in and did exactly that. Came in, started doing customer service, and now he's running the gym and our whole fitness side of the business. And you even look at like Primal Swolger. That guy was working in the warehouse not so long ago, and now he has 1 million people following him on Instagram. There's so many great stories like that on it.
Absolutely. And I've met most of them when
Yeah,
they were at the shake, when they're making shakes and smoothies and being friendly to everyone. And now they're coaches, they're
yeah.
working on Aubrey's team, they're working different departments. Yeah, that's very true.
How about Ian? Ian was
Yeah.
making Aubrey shakes, and now he runs the entire Aubrey Marcus brand.
Yeah. And the
It's
fit for
awesome.
service. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
So we talked about going for your win at the beginning of this podcast, and what going for your win means to me is enjoying the process. We live in such a destination oriented society. When I get this degree, when I get this job, when I get this relationship, when I get this house, when I get this car, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, down the line, that we forget that the sweetness lays on the journey, on the path there, on the process. So for going for your win, for me, is enjoying the process. What does going for your win mean to you, Jason? And what does going for your win look like for you today?
Yeah, I don't know if this is good or bad, but over time, my identity has truly got uh, inextricably intertwined with the DNA of the brand of Onnit. And so I have trouble, as embarrassing as this is, separating out what is Onnit and what is me, because a lot of the value I put, even on me personally, comes from the brand. And I don't recommend that for everybody, but if you're going to run a company, it does have to be that way, because you want what you're so passionate about to flow through the entire thing. So when you ask a question like, what does going for your win look like? For me, it actually borders on a morality thing that was my mission before. Is I want to make an impact on as many people's lives as possible. And the way that I can do that is to get on it to as many people as possible. Now, while that seems, for people that don't know Onnit, they might not know why I would be that passionate about it. But Onnit's the first company in human history that's been able to have permissibility and speak with expertise about the entire wheel of optimization, whether it be supplementation, fitness, nutrition, or even mental and emotional wellness. There's companies that can talk in two areas of that, but Onnit can talk through the whole wheel. And that's so important that that really, just like what happened to me, what happened to you, what happened to all the people that we talked about, is there's a lot of people out there that are looking to be touched by some entity like that can help them get on that path to go for their win. And so what my win right now is to get in front of as many people as possible, to help as many people as possible. And a lot of people say that, and it's like corporate bullshit, because they're just trying to up their revenue. But I really mean it. Like, I want to expose it to as many people as possible. I go through and like anybody that hashtags get on it on Instagram, and I go into the Onnit tribe and follow those stories every single day, because that's what's meaningful to me. That's how I end my day every day.
Yeah, that's beautiful. No, we just had John Wolf on last week, and
Oh, nice.
him and Shane have done a great job with the Onnit Academy, cultivating a community there. But over a quarantine, taking that tribe online with their Onnit 6 challenges, and there's been a really big community there in the Facebook tribe. So if any listeners are looking for their community, that's a great place to start, as John recommended last week.
Yeah, it really is. The cool thing is, everybody hopes that their community eventually becomes strong enough that it can start to self-perpetuate and self-run. And we hit that this year, where companies are normally trying to like drag everybody along to focus in on their content. But that tribe now has so many people helping each other and encouraging each other, and real friendships, real relationships have been built out of the tribe, which is pretty incredible to watch.
Mm-hmm. And let's maybe talk about the kind of a rebranding of Onnit with your new catch line, and it's all you. Do you want to maybe explain what that means?
Yeah, I love that, all you, because it really is everything that we've been talking about, going for your win, right? And uh, when I joined the Army, they had switched their slogan from "Be All You Can Be," which is what it was forever, and they switched it to "An Army of One." And it got a lot of flack at the time, because like Army is a team thing, right? Like, and everybody missed the point of what they were trying to say. They were trying to say, that the army of one, you alone can make such a huge impact just by being there. So don't miss the opportunity, right? And All You is very similar in that sense, that it's kind of like the Nike says, just do it, which is the best slogan of all time, because we talk about that first step, just effing do it, just start. And All You is supposed to get into that same vein and say that ultimately you are just a summation of your actions. It's all you. So it's the concept of personal responsibility for owning yourself, because all of us have gotten, well, I shouldn't say all of us, a lot of us have gotten pretty deep into some dark places, gotten depressed, had to go through a traumatic injury, had to overcome a lot, and nobody does it for you. You have to get through that yourself. And sometimes it takes a long time, but it is within your power to overcome. And so that's the concept in a nutshell, is that we'll help. We're here to do everything for you, but at the end of the day, it's all you.
Absolutely. And that's how change begins. Change starts with the self. From my opinion, that's how it works.
Yeah,
And,
that's right.
So no, and I love that. You mentioned traumatic injury, and that's something we both have in common. In 2010, I suffered a traumatic brain injury, and I was in a coma for 3.5 days and over a week of amnesia, and that really radically changed my life. And again, I allowed that to change my life. I changed my life by learning from that. And you also suffered a really traumatic incident with a car accident, and maybe you want to get into that and what you learned from that process.
Yeah, really, really timely too, because tonight, well, not tonight, technically tomorrow at 5:26 a.m., it will be 14 years. So this is the anniversary of that accident for me today. And I got into a car accident when I fell asleep. I was actually on my way to work after getting no sleep. And it was admittedly a night that I was up really late drinking, try to get 2 hours of sleep or whatever it was, and fell asleep and rolled my car. It rolled 7 times, went up in the air, sheared a telephone pole off 6 feet in the air. I landed in a gravel driveway on a county highway. Car started on fire. I got lucky for so many reasons. Number one, the guy whose house I landed in front of was home. Number two, his hose was able to reach, and he was able to push the gasoline that was pouring out, because it was a gravel driveway, was able to push it away from the fire that was starting at the front. I mean, it was really bad. Plus, I didn't know at the time, but I had broken my neck, and 3 vertebrae had crushed into my spine. And so I wasn't able to move either, and I was on the side. And so I was effectively trapped. And so they had to jaws the life me out of the vehicle, rip the roof back, pull me out, and then they actually landed the helicopter on the highway and stopped traffic in both ways and took me in the helicopter and went to a hospital. And that was obviously just extraordinarily impactful. This entire time was extraordinarily impactful, because the next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital, and I remember looking up and wondering why they had me strapped down. Like, they had me just strapped down so tight. And I'm yelling for somebody to come into the room, and the nurse sees me, immediately calls the doctor. The doctor comes in, and I was like, what? I'm so confused. I was like, why do you have me strapped down? And he says, you're actually not strapped down. You were in a bad car accident, and you are currently paralyzed from the neck down. And people use the word hopeless a lot. And I can tell you, at that moment, I knew with the absolute root meaning of the word hopeless felt like, because it didn't even dawn on me that I was paralyzed. And then at the time, I didn't know if there was any hope. And when you first hear it, you don't think it. You just assume you're paralyzed for life. And it was horrific. And like that moment still has a huge impact on me. And he went on to say, though, that they weren't sure how bad it was. They weren't sure if my spine was severed, because there's so much inflammation, there's so much bone, that they got to wait until some of the inflammation goes down to do all the CAT scan, MRI, and I think the only thing they had at the time was some X-rays. And then a couple days later, he said, there's probably a 60% chance that you're going to get much or most of your feeling back. And so 60% I thought was pretty good, because I figured he might be under promising a bit, and went through a couple surgeries. And then I'll never forget it. There were, in 2006, the year this happened, there was this football game between the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons. It was the first game that Reggie Bush was going to play. He was playing against Michael Vick, and here's the two most athletic guys. And I remember thinking, I'm going to use this as kind of this big distraction from what's happening. I'll just look forward to this game. And it was like the third quarter of this game, and all of a sudden I felt somebody just stick me with a hot poker right in the side of my shin. And I screamed bloody murder for about 2 seconds. And then all of a sudden I realized that I just felt something. And then it switched from me screaming to me just crying. Just like I've never cried like that in my life. So overcome, because I knew if I could feel that, I was going to get it all back, likely, at least on that side. And over the next 11 days, I did get feeling back. I ended up standing, took my first step that day, and spent a year and a half doing physical therapy. It took me a year and a half before. The reason I say a year and a half is because a year and a half is when I skipped and I ran for the first time effectively. And so I felt like that was a good milestone to mark that at. But I did physical therapy after that as well. And so it was a lot to overcome, especially because I was, living alone at that time, and you start wondering, like, what the hell am I going to do? How am I going to survive? How am I going to go to the bathroom? Am I just going to be in convalescence care the entire time? And like, it's so scary. Like, I know that you understand that, but I mean, it's, if I could convey to people how impactful that feeling is, I would, because it is life altering.
Mm-hmm. And how did you overcome that fear that you're going through with that year and a half process of not knowing you'll be able to walk again, run again, go to the bathroom on your own again? How did you overcome? How did you maintain your resiliency during that time?
You just said the right word. I've said that forever. I think success is based on your ability to be resilient. And sometimes you can force yourself into resiliency, and sometimes you have to force yourself into resiliency. It's like the Finding Dory, right? Like, just keep swimming. You just got to keep swimming. That's all you got to do. You don't have to do anything else. Just keep swimming. And one foot in front of the other. And in this case, it was that literally is when that's the interesting thing about hopelessness is you, in some weird way, it actually made me somewhat hopeful, because it was the only direction left to go. And so I just wanted to focus on making inchworm improvements every day. After I felt something, that's all I did, was just try and do a little something every day. And I think that's one thing that gets missed a lot. And I think that's actually why a lot of people give up sooner than they should. They're confused about how close they are to success. They're actually really close, but it's a lot of work. And success goes on these long plateaus with really high, and they're like steps. But people want it to be like this. They want it to be like a rocket ship. It's not like that. And so really just grinding gets you to those big wins, but you have to just trust the process. You have to keep with the process and trust the people around you.
Mm-hmm. Faith is a big part of it for me. Having faith over fear and just moving forward.
Faith is a great way. You know, like because beyond any of your religious faith, you have to have faith in yourself because you're all you have, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, a part in that car accident you were mentioned is overworking and also alcohol.
Yep.
Did you give up alcohol after that incident, or was that came a later down the road?
It did come later down the road. I actually gave up alcohol for a significant period of time and then kind of tricked myself into believing that I could start drinking again as long as I didn't go anywhere or, you know, drive or anything like that. And I didn't, but it still was being used as a medication, not a very good one. So what ended up happening, what actually made it worse, is now I was just sitting at home drinking alone. And so it actually put me into a bit of a depression, despite objectively my life going pretty well. I was working, I was showing up for work every day. I had a good job, all those things, but I just wasn't having the impact on myself or the world that I wanted to have. So I think it delayed things a bit, but at the same point, like now I look back on it and it was a necessary part of my journey. I don't want to give myself a pass on it, but I do need to accept it for what it is.
Mm-hmm. And there's something we were talking with John Wolfe. He also dealt with addiction issues, him with methamphetamine.
Yep.
And we talked about how addiction is, and whether that be to drugs, to TV, to food, to sex, it's us avoiding facing something. What do you feel you're using that alcohol to avoid? And
I was trying to avoid failure because like I was, you know, I talk a lot about the difference between true and truth. And we all have things that if we really sit in silence and think about deeply, there's things that you know are truth. You just know them beyond what you can see or a series of facts that tell you something's true. There's something else. And that's where, you know, faith is the same thing, right? Faith is your truth. And I really believed that that I could make a real impact in the world. That was my truth. But that was so uncomfortable to think about because I like to think of myself as a humble person. And the juxtaposition between like being humble and thinking you're just part of this broader world and then thinking that you can have an impact on the whole world, those are at odds, right? And they hit these crossroads. So I avoided it because if I didn't start, I couldn't fail. And so I avoided even starting for a long time.
yeah, and that's a big thing that holds people from going for their win, their fear of failure, false evidence appearing real, fear. That's the number one thing that holds people back. And the thing that most people fear is failure, not succeeding. How do you recommend someone that is against that wall of fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear?
Yeah, you know, and there actually, let me recommend a book. I don't do many book recommendations, but there is a life-changing book out there called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. I'm sure a lot of people that are watching this have probably read it. It changed my life because while he's talking about, well, his original intention was to talk about the creative process, but really what he's talking about is facing down fear. And the great message of that book, and it becomes so painfully obvious once he talks about it, is all the good things are through the fear. And so that resistance, as he calls it, is really your cardinal north. You should always be going into the resistance because all the easy way outs, they are littered with people that have quit. All the good, all the big rewards that you're trying to get are directly into the resistance. And that's the hardest part. That's the resiliency where you kind of have to lean forward into the wind and just keep trudging forward because it kind of sucks. And, you know, but it's like a metamorphic rock, right? Like they get made with heat and pressure. And that's how all diamonds get made. And I think people are much the same way because if you've gone through and needed that resilience, you harden on the outside, but you don't harden on the inside. Like you get tough, you can handle more. And the more you can handle, the further you can go. And I really think when people think about fear, they misconstrue it as your fight or flight kicks in. And because fear historically, like, was to keep you safe from lions and the wrong berries and spiders and all those things that could kill you. But in this new world which is objectively safer, it actually causes you to not do things you otherwise could to be successful. And a perfect example of that is public speaking. More people are afraid of public speaking than death in a poll that I saw. And public speaking is terrifying when you first do it, but there's really no absolute danger in it. Like, it's not like there is a life or death scenario there, but it feels like it. And so in our society now, I think it keeps people from going for their win, because they're, no matter what people's win is, it's behind a fear.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about the last fear that you faced and overcome. What was that?
That's a good question. Wow, that is a good question. I mean, I'm sure I faced them. Well, yeah, I guess I have one. I was going to say coming to Onnit, because I gave up a lot to come to Onnit, and that was scary. But actually, the fear of failure came in more recently. In a couple of years ago, we had a real cash issue with the business. And I talked about this when I podcasted with Aubrey, and it was scary. It was really tenuous position where I was looking at AP every day and trying to decide which bills to pay. And you don't want to be in a situation like that. It was that way for a variety of reasons, but our CFO walked out too. So literally it was all on me. And I was very scared because I didn't feel equipped to handle it. I wasn't smart enough. I didn't have enough experience. I didn't have enough knowledge. I certainly didn't have enough money. And that was really scary, because here I'm looking at 110 employees at the time that are all counting on me figuring this out. And all these fans of Onnit and customers of Onnit are counting, maybe they don't know it, but at this point they're counting on me to figure this out. And that was scary. That was a tremendous amount of pressure. But then the thing that you realize is experience is a bit overrated. Schooling is a bit overrated. The thing that I think is way too underrated is people's ability to intuitively know what the right thing to do is. And I think everybody that has a relatively high EQ can manage their way through really complex issues that they've never dealt with before, because I think it comes intuitively. And that did, we worked through it, came out stronger on the other side. Even though I went in not knowing what I was doing, I came out being an expert,
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, Jason.
Yeah.
We talked about Stephen Pressfield, and he describes resistance as that negative force that keeps people from fulfilling our dreams. And we're going to come up against resistance over and over and over again for the rest of our lives till the end of time. How do you face your resistance that comes up to you today? What are your strategies at overcoming that on a daily basis?
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, for a long time, I had to talk myself into it, and I would read books and I'd come up with strategies and I'd write plans. And like I was in a seeking mode where I would look for ways to conquer resistance and fear all the time. I'm so happy that I've gotten to a place in my career now where I know that's just part of the game. Like, by the time a decision gets to me now, there are no easy answers. They're all complicated issues. And so it happens so much now that you kind of live in a realm of resistance, and you start to get confidence that you're equipped to handle it a little bit more easily, because you've been battle hardened enough, and it's just like anything, like anybody that's played sports knows that once you start to get comfortable, the game slows down a little bit and you understand where everybody's going to be a little bit. You can even tell when you're in traffic where you don't know why, but you know somebody's about to change lanes, and you can kind of feel the playing field. Well, I think introducing resistance gets people to that point. So I think really it's like courage is like a muscle. It strengthens with use, right? And so the more that you can work that muscle out, the stronger you get, and you're not afraid of the bigger weights anymore. It's the same thing with the weight of decision making. And so I think the way to deal with the resistance is resistance training.
Yeah, absolutely. So we mentioned one factor in that car accident almost 14 years ago now to the day was you're overworking yourself. How do you take note of that in your work with Onnit today to not overwork yourself and to provide work-life balance?
To be honest, I don't think I still do a very good job of that. I think, you know what I found? I found a cheat code with Onnit, and that is like when I was working at hotels, I was just grinding, 16 hours a day, a lot of times, 7 to 11, just because you had to. You were understaffed, and it was tough to staff the business, and there's so much to do, and the margins were so thin, and you just grind. Well, that is like works over here, and there is no personal, there's very little long-term joy that's being derived out of that. But with Onnit, it's a bit of a cheat code because I found a way to switch from having work-life balance to just life balance, because my work is really part of my life and lifestyle. I love the products we have. I love what we do. And so I kind of, this is thanks to Aubrey, because he really built a business around the stuff he liked to do. He wanted to have a gym, so he got a gym, and he liked supplements, so he started selling supplements. And so I think you'll find that a lot of the people that work there are able to intertwine it because it really is part of their personal life. I think I don't have any kids like John does. And I think that's the only thing that you have to really create that balance for, is if you have some people counting on you on the other side to make sure you're spending time with them too. But for me, I get to really commit to Onnit.
Yeah. A big part that Onnit talks about is self-care. So let's talk about, what are some self-care practices you use in your life balance?
Yeah. So, and this is, this is the thing about Onnit is, while Onnit doesn't sell float tanks, we've historically talked a lot about floating. If anybody listening does not float, they really should try it once. And if you try it once, try it twice, because it will be a sensation that you've never experienced before. And it takes a while to get used to it, because for all you know, you go from laying in a pool to be floating in space and wonder how you got there. So floating is a good one. The easiest one everybody should do is do a wind up and a wind down when you're in bed. Do a quick body scan meditation, something like that. Anybody that doesn't do that, I always tell them, you got to do that. Even if you're going to meditate later in the day, just do a quick thing. It helps me remind myself to be mindful throughout the day. It helps me to wind down my mind at night, certainly. I just enjoy it. And then, obviously diet, exercise, like the things that are pretty well vetted at this point. But I like to experiment a little bit too, because I'm in the supplement game. So I like to try all sorts of things and test how it makes me feel. And so now, after all these years, like there's all sorts of supplements that I can take if I'm feeling a little grouchy, or if I'm feeling a little forgetful, or whatever it is. And some of those we obviously make, but that's a fun thing. That's kind of a hobby of mine too, but it definitely helps with self-care for sure.
Mm. So let's talk about supplements a little bit. I always make sure to take an Alpha Brain before I record these podcasts, or anytime I really have a big event. Just like you, I really feel the effects of Alpha Brain. I also love New Mood when I feel I need to relax, and Shroom Tech Sport is always great before sports. Those are my 3 favorite supplements, period. And they all happen to be your brand. What are your favorite supplements, your brand and otherwise?
Yeah. So without a doubt, Alpha Brain's my number one. I love it so much, just because you can notice that difference. And anybody that wants to test that, as long as you have the day off the next day or something, you don't, because you might not get great sleep, try to take Alpha Brain before you go to sleep and just experience the dream state that you get into. It's the weirdest thing in the world. Like, some people call it lucid dreaming. I don't get fully lucid, but I just have really vivid, memorable, and that's the, acetylcholine, or the cholinergic effect happening. Your brain is just on fire. And so that's awesome. I love Alpha Brain. It helps me with everything on a daily basis. You mentioned Shroom Tech. I love Shroom Tech if I'm running, because I've been doing a lot more running lately. Ever since COVID, I've gotten really into running, but because it's non-stimulant based, and I hate feeling jittery. I can't stand it. And it's the best non-stimulant supplement I've ever taken. Obviously, I'm super biased, but I don't know of many. So there's a couple. Now, I mentioned if I get grouchy. One thing I really love to take is mucuna purines, and there's a few different companies that make them. Maybe I can see it from here, but mucuna purines is essentially is where you can get L-Dopa to boost up your dopamine a little bit. And so if I'm in a grouchy mood, I'll take one of those, and I'll just have I get a little goofy, get into dad joke mode, but that's a great supplement. And then trying to think of some others. I'm trying to think of some that aren't Onnit supplements, because I almost exclusively take Onnit supplements, but I don't want to seem like a shill either. But I do have to say that we sell vitamin D, but anybody that doesn't take vitamin D should really consider having that in the arsenal, because that's a pretty easy win.
Yeah. You mentioned a few times running now, and from my work with Adidas and Reebok and their box program, I learned that physical activity is the number one thing we could do for your brain. And a great book about that is Spark by Dr. John Rady. So how do you attend to your physical activity? You mentioned running. What else do you do? And what does that running look like?
Yeah, so that actually, I think that's a really good thing about Onnit, is we're not all built like John Wolfe, right? Or a Primal Soldier. And I'm obviously not a big muscle bound guy. I think that surprises people. Like, I think people think that when they walk into Onnit, it's just going to be just all these brooding Juan Lejas. and that's the cool thing about Onnit, is you can come at optimization from a million different lanes. And really, brain health is how I got in. It's just like you, we had this conversation before. Brain health is something that I'm extraordinarily passionate about, but I've never been super passionate about just bulking. Like cramming calories, I can't do it. It's just not fun for me. But like you said, I realize, because brain health is so important to me, that I have to do some aerobic exercise, and I need to get the heart rate up. And so body weight workouts are a great way to do that too, if you're not moving. But when I was in the Army, I really fell in love with distance running, and I hadn't done it in years, and only occasionally even got out and ran a mile or two. But then when COVID hit, I started running some more, and now that's like gotten back in. I've gotten kind of passionate about it again, and because I just think it's also very meditative, so you can knock out a couple things at once. And the worst thing about, it's so hard to run until you can break through. And anybody that's run has had that moment where you're like, oh, I'm not struggling. Like I'm feeling good out here. And you start to build that confidence, and you're like, and especially for a tall, skinny guy like me, if I can get the endurance there, I can go. And so I think that's where I'm having my biggest win right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I've never been a fan of running myself, but during COVID, I've been running like a lot. It's become one of my favorite physical activities.
Yeah.
And I make sure to take Epsom salt baths to help me with my recovery. Epsom salt baths and krill oil, those have been two.
I was just going to say
Um,
krill. Krill is, you got to take krill. Yep.
really good for the joints. So
Yep.
let's
Yep.
talk about the Army.
Yeah.
What were your major takeaways from the Army, and what did you do for the Army?
So, we just talked about me being thin. Well, I used to be super thin. Like when I joined the Army in 1995, I got rejected for being underweight. And the guy at the MEPS, which is the Military Entrance Processing Station, he said, he's like, we let 5-10 people out of here every day for being overweight. He's like, this is the first time in 3 years that I've been here that anybody's been booted for being underweight. I think at the time I was 6'3". I think I weighed 116 pounds, and I needed to be like 132 before they let me in for that height. So I came home and I just ate pounds of bacon and ice cream. And I went from being in shape to totally out of shape, but had enough weight. And so I got in, but that was really the reason I went in, is because I felt like a weakling and I didn't like myself. And so I was like, I'm going to go into the Army so I can be a badass. And so I didn't just go into the Army. I went into the infantry because I knew their basic training was 13 weeks as opposed to 8, and become this badass infantryman. And so I went in, and then and the drill sergeants, I'm sure, do this on purpose, but I became an infantry mortarman. So not only was I carrying an 80-pound ruck, but then I had a 26-pound base plate, because all 3 guys in the team carry one part of the mortar, the base plate, the tripod, or the tube. And so I got to carry around the base plate. So here I am at 116 pounds carrying a 106-pound pack. And at one point at the end of basic training, you go on this terrible march. It's like 18 hours or 18 miles. It lasted like 7 hours, and it just wrecked my body. And so I went in as infantry, but that only lasted for about a year because my body was just getting wrecked. I was just too long and lanky to carry that much weight. And so because there's a test that you take when you join called the ASVAB test, and it's basically a competency test to see what jobs you qualify for. And I did relatively well on that, so I was able to switch to military intelligence. And so that's what I did the last 5 years, is did military intelligence. I was a sergeant when I got out, so I was an NCO. I wasn't a commissioned officer, and so I spent a lot of that time just doing intelligence dissemination for my unit, which was a Black Hawk helicopter unit, which was cool because we got to be on a lot of air bases, so we got to eat with the Air Force guys, and they get all the good food. So.
And it's great how at Onnit you guys continue to support the military. You guys offer discount to military members, and you guys give back to that community as well.
Yeah, it's great. And, we did a lot of work, charity work with Hire Heroes, which former MMA fighter Brian Stan started, and to help returning veterans. And it's still important to me personally. I was fortunate that I was in from 95 to 01. So I missed the first Gulf War, and really 9/11 was happening at the end of 01. So I was in during a time of relative peace, probably one of the more peaceful 6 years that we've had. But the people that were in my unit after I got out, they got deployed 3 times in 5 years. They went to Kuwait, to Iraq, and to Afghanistan. And I know all those people. They left behind a lot of families and babies and, jobs and all these other things. And so it's important to me personally, because that sacrifice is really real, and you don't get paid a lot to do it. And so the people that are doing it want to be there. It might be part of their mission, but they're still sacrificing a lot. And a lot of times their spouse and their kids are as well.
Well, for sure. You mentioned MAPS during is something with the military, but there's also the MAPS, like the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, I believe it's called. I know that Aubrey has a lot of involvement with.
Yeah.
And you mentioned ayahuasca earlier on. And so MAPS has been doing a lot of research on the effect of psychedelics to help soldiers and people cure themselves from PTSD, um, depression, suicidal inclinations with things like psilocybin, um, LSD, ayahuasca. There's a
Yeah.
real new movement behind psychedelics. And we talked about this with John a bit. And Michael Pollan, a really great food author, has wrote a book about psychedelics and how they can be used to cure depression and other illnesses, that mental health illnesses, particularly troubling to soldiers. So let's talk about your journey with psychedelics and ayahuasca.
Yeah. Well, and I'd like to say, you know, what the cool thing is when you talk about depression, you talk about PTSD, you even talk about things like Alzheimer's, ADHD, um, uh, different forms of dementia. What are we talking about? We're talking about brain health.
Yeah.
And Onnit it deals with baseline up, right? We don't deal with deficiencies or disease, but we're still talking about brain health. And I think brain health is the most important and fascinating conversation of our century. And it should be something, no pun intended, that should be on all of our minds. It's the most important thing because it affects everything and everything around everything. Um, and when you talk about PTSD, you talk about Alzheimer's, those are debilitating things. You talk about depression. And and you use the word cure, and I think it's one of the most shocking parts of this whole thing is with everything else that we've ever talked about in health, you never hear the word cure get used because it's a dangerous word because you don't want to install false hope, and it's generally not accurate. But what you've seen happen with the MDMA studies with a lot of things, including migraines, but also, which is also brain health, but with childhood trauma, and you've seen what's happened with psilocybin and PTSD, amongst other things. It's amazing what is happening there, and we should put the full weight of the scientific community behind that, because there's nothing we could do that could make a bigger difference than that. Now, my personal journey, while I certainly had some PTSD, a little from various things in my life, nothing compared to what a lot of people deal with, but it certainly was a contributing factor to depression that I was having. But when I went to do ayahuasca, my main mission was I wanted to get in touch with the part of my brain that was making me do things that I wouldn't have otherwise chose to do. Like procrastination is a huge debilitating thing for me. And I just wanted to talk to it. And so I felt like the most powerful psychedelic on earth, if that can't get me to talk to the deep part of my brain, nothing can. And so that's why I went on that journey. And what I experienced was nothing short of the most incredible experience of my life. And just I could talk about it for 8 hours, but it really did lay out for me. It brought those truths I was talking about earlier and aligned it with what's happening up here in my neocortex, where I actually started actioning based on my truths as opposed to actioning based on my subconscious. And it set me up for everything that's come since. It's amazing.
And it's great that we're, as a society, we're talking more and more about these things and bringing more light, because I really believe psychedelics are the future to a lot of brain health healing, and healing just in general.
I always throw a quick caveat on that too, because when I was 20, I did LSD and mushrooms a few times just recreationally, and they were fun, but now I understand them in a different light, and these things are powerful medicines. And so I really do think they need to be done in coordination with somebody that is able to direct the experience, and they should not be done flippantly, because they are so powerful that they can really make a huge positive impact in your life, but they're not something to be toyed with.
That's a very important word of advice. And I also feel like it's not something that you need to continuously be going back to the well over and
That's right.
over and over again. You get lessons, and it's your opportunity to implement those lessons, where I see a lot of people, they just go back and back again and again and again without implementing the truths that you've been told.
That's
And
right.
that itself is a form of resistance, just like alcohol or just like anything.
Yeah, you're exactly right. What I saw happen, I haven't done a psychedelic since 2015, but I did go back a second time because I really felt called, like I still had a couple unresolved things there. But I was surprised that about 50% of the people that were there the second time were there the first time. And so as I got talking to these people, I realized some people found their community in this group of people that they really trusted as friends. And so they started going back for the wrong reason. They were going back just to hang out with their community. That's not the right reason to do it either, because that becomes recreational. And this is such a powerful medicine that while I'm starting to actually feel the urge again after 5 years, in between that, I didn't give it a second thought, because it really put me on the right path. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that. So that has been one of your helpers along the path. Let's talk about actual people, mentors and helpers that you've met on your hero's journey that have been really influential. So let's take some time to acknowledge those mentors, those helper, and what did you learn from them?
Yeah, the first person I consider to be a mentor is this gentleman, Captain David Toth, in the Army. And I just thought he was the coolest. And you know why? Because the Army is nothing but rules. And he danced on the edges of those rules all the time, but always for the right reasons. It was always if he felt that there was something that just didn't make sense with the rules, or they um, weren't effective. And he taught me to open my eyes a bit, because I was very tunnel vision to doing what I should do, doing what I was supposed to. And he opened me up to what I am supposed to do might not be in line with what the rules are. And I need to know when to bend those rules. And it really opened my line of thinking up much more broadly. And so he has probably had as big of an impact on me as anybody without even realizing it, just by watching him. But then, I mentioned my hotel mentor, John Archibald. He was a brooding Scot, he had a big thick accent, and he was awesome. Love that guy. And the reason he was a mentor is because he always just seemed to make the right decision, and everybody still loved him. And he would let somebody go and they'd always hug him. And I was like, how's he do that? He's magic. So I just watched everything he did, and I took a lot of my leadership tools from him. And then I have to mention Aubrey, because Aubrey really taught me to think bigger, just really get rid of all the self-limiting thoughts that we self-imposed limits that we put on ourselves, because there aren't actually really any limits other than the ones that we self-impose. And so between those three people, I really feel like that's what shaped me the most.
Mm-hmm. When you're talking to your team at Onnit, what is your number one leadership tip for them on how they could act as leaders and serve their community, serve the company?
Yeah, well, I'll start with one that is in line with everything we've talked about. It's on my LinkedIn. I say it every time I get a chance, but it is my motto, and it's not what happens to you, it's how you react to it. Because the cards in the card game keep coming. It really matters how you're going to play your hand. And so that's number one, because you get judged as a leader when you're under pressure, not when everything's going easy. So you better be ready to respond when times get tough. So that's the biggest one. But then the other one I would say is never undervalue a relationship, regardless of who it's with. Always try to deposit more than you withdraw in every relationship, because I don't know how it works, but I try to deposit more than I withdraw in every relationship, and I still feel like I'm winning. You know, it's funny how that works.
Yeah, it is. So we're talking about relationships, and love and relationships go hand in hand, I believe. What does love mean to you, Jason?
Wow, you saved a big one for the backside of this, didn't you?
Yeah.
What does love mean? I mean, yeah, that's such a beautiful question too. And I'm not sure if anybody's ever been able to answer it totally accurately, because really, when I think about life, anything that's alive, whether it be a plant, a bacteria, a fungus, a mosquito, or us, I feel that there has to be, now I'm getting into the metaphysical, but there has to be some connection between life, because there's just too many anecdotal reasons to believe that. But when I look in between entities, like when I think about like the love between somebody and their pet, or versus somebody and their spouse, right? The love is the same thing, but the action and mechanism is different. But that love really comes from the giving of yourself without any intention of reciprocation, right? Like you're willing to help, you're willing to bare your soul, you're willing to give without any expectation. I think that's truly that love, because you care about that entity so much that its goodwill and its safety and health actually makes you feel better as an individual. And that's like you brought them into your life force, right? So I think for me, that's how I understand love.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about love, all you? Because I think it starts with the self. That's where love begins.
Yeah, right. Like, and that's kind of what I was getting to is people look at externalized love, like I love her, but you don't. What you're really loving is the effect she has on you, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. And so what you're really doing is bringing this life force into yourself, and so it just becomes a broader version of yourself, an extension of who you are. Kind of like tools are extensions of the hand, right? Like the drill is really just your hand with an extension on it. But people that you bring into the mix, you can love. Love is infinite, right? So it's not just like who that you're physically intimate with. Like you can express that love to people that you don't even know. In fact, I think we all do it pretty regularly, right? And you're, in some ways, by serving others, you're serving yourself too, and that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think it may just all be a reflection, right? What you see in others is the reflection of what you see in yourself.
That's for sure. And that's
So when,
usually how it comes back around, right? Because of that, like that saying that I like in some ways, is that you're the average of the 5 or 10 people that you keep company with. And really that is true. You get some buoyancy from that, but that's you creating your own reality. And so
yeah,
if you're reflecting that love, you're more likely to attract people that are similarly minded, and ultimately you end up living a better life for it.
absolutely. And that comes down to choices,
That is, yep.
our most powerful human freedom.
Yep, you are nothing more. Your entire identity is nothing more than a summation of your choices.
Mm-hmm. So as we move towards the end of this interview, I just have a few more questions. But a really big one here is, what has been the greatest life lesson you've learned on your path thus far that you'd like to share with the audience?
You know, well, I wasn't going to say this one, but it's something I haven't talked about. So I think this is a good one. When when I was 5, my dad died. And I remember not understanding what death was. Like, I just knew he wasn't there, but I didn't really comprehend what death was, right? And I went to the wake, and I'm running around with my cousins and playing and whatever. And I didn't go up to the casket. I didn't even think about it. I didn't even really know what I was doing there, to be honest. And my mom's like, you know, you got to get up to the casket before we go and go say bye to your dad. And I walked up there, and I got up on the, I was in this Catholic church, and there's like this little bench that you can kneel on, but I stood on it, and I looked over and I saw him. And in 1 second, I went from not knowing what death was to being acutely aware of what death was. And I broke. I fell on the ground. I was hyperventilating. I was screaming no. I had to get carried out of the the church. I mean, it was something else. And that had such an effect on me, negatively at the time, but positively long term, because it made me acutely aware that nothing is promised, and you need to start now. You need to take responsibility for your relationships, because you never know when things are going to change. You just never know. But when you think about, if everybody that's listening to this thinks about their life right now, how many moments did you not know were coming that totally changed everything? There's a lot, right? Like, whether it be your grandfather dying, or a car accident, or a health thing, or a job, whatever. It doesn't even have to be negative things, but it's happened a lot. So you can assume that in the second half of your life, there's going to be a bunch more of those moments. And since you don't know what those moments are, treat them all like they're about to be the moment. Because they're coming. It's going to change. It's the only
inevitable.
Yeah, that's the only thing that is inevitable. People say that death and taxes are the only things that are inevitable, but people cheat death and taxes every day. No one cheats change. Change gets you.
And just keep on putting all those reps of facing change with that courage, like you said. And
that's right.
You get stronger and more resilient.
That's right.
So in 3 words, how would you in 3 words or a phrase, whatever comes to you, how would you describe the experience you were having on this earth?
I was going to say fortunate, but the first one I'm going to say is blessed. I'm not really like a traditional religious person, but I can't think of a better word for just the fact that I even got here. Like even the fact that I'm getting this spark at life makes me feel like the whole thing must be a simulation, because how could I be lucky enough to be here right now? So blessed is going to be the first one. Resiliency certainly is going to be the second one. And change is going to be the third one, because and change in a different way than what we were talking about is, we talked about the metamorphic rock, right? And you go through different cycles in your life, and they're all different yous. You're not the same person as you were when you were 18. You're not even the same person as you were yesterday. Aubrey always uses that analogy of a man can't stand in the river because it's not the same man, it's not the same river. It's the exact same thing. And the embracing of that change has been so impactful for me. And because it goes to what you talked about, it is this journey, and that's what makes it magical, is you get to experience a billion different yous. It's cool.
Excellent. Yeah, that's so cool. Something that we get to experience.
Yeah, we're very, very blessed.
So my last official question, I just want to talk about, hear what's going on at Onnit after this question. What do you have on deck with your company? But our last question that we ask everyone is, we're all magicians, and I'm going to use my magic powers, and I'm going to transport us into the future. I'm going to transport us into the future where we sit alongside an 85-year-old Jason Havey. Who is that 85-year-old Jason Havey? What does your life look like, and what is the legacy you've left behind?
I always said, when I'm old and retired, I want to be a curmudgeon old bellman at a hotel, you know, like in the movies where I'm just stacking bags everywhere, and I'm just but you know, I really hope I'm a wise old man. like hopefully when I'm 85, I'm still sage enough and clear enough mentally to be able to be giving advice, because like I think we've all gotten that advice from our grandfathers or grandmothers or whoever, and it's always so impactful because they are the elders, right? So you weight their wisdom heavier. So hopefully I'm able to do that, but hopefully I'm just happy, because there's not much you get to do about it once you're 85, right? You have to live with whatever you've made of your life. This might make me emotional, but fuck, man, you don't want to be living at 85 with just a mountain of regret. I should have done this. I should have done that. That would suck. And I just want to make sure that I'm an 85-year-old not living with regret, and we all leave it all on the field here while we have a chance to make a difference.
Absolutely. And we just can't leave us hanging in the future. So we're going to transport back to the present. And that 85-year-old Jason Havey sends you a message. What does he tell you?
I think he probably says, take time to enjoy the ride, because it does move really fast. It's like that Ferris Bueller quote, right? Like if you don't stop and take a look around once in a while, but it's so true. Like my 6 years at Onnit have gone by so quickly. And I like to think that multiple times I've stopped and kind of said, soak in this moment, because this moment's special. But I don't know if we can do enough of that.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. And when you're talking about hoping you have that wisdom at 85, it made me remember something that I forgot to ask you about that I really would love your input on. And that is your Spinning Logic podcast. You recorded 170 episodes, just under 170 episodes. And I'm here. This is our 21st episode. And I'm just getting, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just getting started. So what advice do you have for me from your podcast experience journey?
You know what? I did it. I started it because I wanted some creative outlet. I just needed something at the time. And I can't believe it went 170 episodes, and it would have kept going, but we got into that cash crunch I was talking about earlier, and my mind was just so overwhelmed that I paused it and I didn't get back to it. But all those podcasts were 100 or hour and a half conversations, just straight conversations. So that's a lot of time. And God, I loved it so much, because the thing that it did for me, I know I'm not answering your question exactly, but the thing that it did for me is it made me much better conversationalist, because I was working those muscles, right? Because you don't get to have dead air. Like as soon as I stop talking in this conversation, you have to start, because it's your show, right? You don't get to just have an awkward pause. And so you get to get really good at being able to pivot and have something to say no matter what the conversation's going to. And so I got a lot out of that. So I would encourage you to embrace what you're getting out of this yourself, because it is special in its own way. But I think the other piece of advice I have is anything you can do to prep your guests for what's about to happen. Because even the guests that are on a lot of podcasts, every podcast has its own little thing, right? And so anything you can do to prep the guest, I think, is a good thing, because you can tell in podcasts where they didn't prep the guest very well. Like you sent me a couple emails, you told me what we were going to be doing, and that's really good to do, because if a guest walks on cold, or they don't know what's happening, I'll tell you where I learned this lesson. Sorry, I just got to tell you one quick story. So early on, it was like podcast 13. I was interviewing this guy that started this charity where he was mowing people's lawns for free, elderly people, right? And he was doing it in Alabama. He's a really good guy, right? But I did not prep him for what we were doing. So I forgot to tell him the easy things, like you should have a microphone, you should be sitting down, whatever. So he does the whole podcast with it never aired. It was the only podcast I never put out, but he did it with like a Bluetooth while he was driving around. You can hear the car dinging. He goes through a drive-through, orders food during the podcast. And I was like, this is terrible. And so I was like, I got to prep people. So that's the piece of advice I'd give you.
Perfect. Thank you. Do you think I should give the full list of my questions in advance or leave that kind of impromptu?
I think you leave it impromptu because it helps with the conversation. The one thing that you might want to do is say, I always prep people because at the end of the podcast, I'd always say, have a what is your motto question. So I'd always give them that one question in advance that we were going to end with that one, right? Because a couple times I'd stump people.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to say.
Perfect. And then to close, they can find you on Instagram, I believe, at Jason Havey.
Yep.
And they can find you on Onnit, in the Onnit community. The Facebook tribe, you're always on there, active, popping in there.
I do.
But what's going on with Onnit moving forward? What are you guys' plans? Like, what's some exciting stuff that you want to leave our audience about with Onnit?
Yeah, I'm excited. I think the place that the people listening to this will see over the next 6 months is we are going all in on a lot of our key products. So you're going to see, 4 more flavors of Alpha Brain Instant. You're going to see us come out with New Mood Instant in 4 flavors right off the bat. You're going to see us come out with we combine some of the ingredients from Shroom Tech Immune and Viratech into a single instant product. So we're going to come out with Viratech Immune Instant 4 flavors. Going all in on that, we have a great product. It's the only one on the market like it, where we're taking a green supplement and a mushroom supplement and putting them together. So Shroom Tech Greens is actually coming out later this year. And then one of the products I'm probably most excited about is coming out in the first quarter of next year. It's called, well, this is the working title. I think it's going to be the title, but I'm not sure, is Alpha Brain Black Label. No one's ever heard this. I've never announced this before, actually. So you're breaking news.
Breaking news.
Breaking news on the podcast. But Alpha Brain Black Label will be a very top line premium nootropic. It's supposed to be, a bit of the end all be all. It's going to be 4 capsules. We're figuring out everything from beautiful packaging but the ingredients are really top of the line. Actually, those mucuna purines I was talking about, the reason I got turned on to those the first time was they were in the original Alpha Brain, but they had to get pulled out for a variety of reasons, including cost. But we're putting them back in. They're coming in Black Label. So very excited about that formula. So you're going to see a lot of cool products coming out based on the big winners. And then sometime in the middle of next year, we'll have Shroom Tech Shroom Tech Sport Instant.
Excellent. And they can all find that at onnit.com.
That's it.
One of my favorite places to visit and to support. So to end all the Welcome to the Winner Circles, we bring our fist in for a digital fist bump. Boom. Welcome to the Winner Circle. This is a place anyone can join, and it starts with a choice. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an honor, Jason.
My honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.